The need for green building has never been more urgent. Buildings contribute to 40% of global energy use and 30% of carbon emissions. Green buildings, climate action advocates, sustainable materials, and green building technologies. Built for good, we tell African stories on green buildings.
Welcome to the Build for Good show. I'm Mogore Jendu, an architect, urban planner, green consultant, and your host. Today I'm excited to be speaking to Mumbi Madhangani, the owner of Bessotted Farmstay, an off-grid eco farmstay.
It's lovely to have you guys here.
Who is Mumbi?
I'm a mother of two, and I'm also a lawyer, an advocate of the High Court, and an entrepreneur.
So the last bit is the one that we're really interested about today. Obviously, we're sitting here in your very beautiful farmstay. I have loads to say about it, but I really want to hear from you. What motivated you? What inspired you to set this up?
Well, I must say, I just love this area of Kenya. I love being close to the mountain. My home is actually about, I would say, 30 kilometers from here. So I wanted to be closer to my parents and to my actual home. And also just have a place that I can call home when I eventually decide that I'm fully retired. So I came looking for land, and immediately I saw this amazing spot where the view of the mountain was simply stunning. It just threw me off guard, and I immediately knew this was a piece of land that I wanted. So I bought the land, built the house, it was my home, but eventually decided that a lot of friends came and they loved the place. And my children were still going to school in Nairobi, so we decided that perhaps I can turn this into a farmstay where other people can come and enjoy. So that's what we proceeded to do.
Your home is off-grid. You're not on, you have absolutely no power from the mains coming to your home. So I really want to understand what motivated you to build an eco-friendly farmstay.
I just don't see any other option, to be quite honest. I just feel that I'm not going to contribute to carbons in the air. I'm keen to be eco-friendly and to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And I also would like to encourage others to do what I'm doing. It's hard at the beginning, but it gets easier as you go along. Of course, lots of mistakes, especially when it comes to expertise, for getting your wind power, your solar power correct. But ultimately, I don't have an electricity bill, and it makes all the difference, especially during COVID times, because that just reduced my expenses, and I just feel better. I feel I'm working with nature, and I think we're supposed to be in that state of nature.
What you're saying is so important. The fact that even if it's difficult, it can be done, because really this is what we're focused on, telling stories that it can be done, and it will be the benefit of the long run, as well as the environment. How do you provide energy to your farmstay? What do you have in place?
It's all natural. So we tap it using solar, and we get the wind, especially at night, and that's the energy that we use. It has turned out, it's enough, it's sufficient. It works for us, it works for our guests. That's not to say that we haven't had hiccups. There've been hiccups here and there, of course, especially in terms of maintenance, because expertise is not everywhere. So if there's a problem, you probably have to get an electrician from far off or a wind power expert. But I think we finally got it right. And now that we did, I'm reaping the benefits. We harvest water. That's why we've made the roof quite long so that we can harvest as much of the water from the roof. And then we also get water from the mountain directly. We have a water project in the community, so we are part of the community. We contribute, And that's where we get most of our water from.
When you talk about eco-friendly and environmentally responsible, is also that element of engaging your community in it. Could you tell us a bit more about how the farmstay is engaged with the community?
The community is part and parcel of our business strategy. From the very beginning, when we started building, the community was very much involved. We tried to use as many people from this community as contractors, foremen, and so on. When we've been doing the agriculture, trying to get the farm going. So we try and grow our organic produce, which is what we also generally serve to the guests. In addition, we also buy from the community, organic produce. This is a community which mostly relies on organic farming. Currently, we have a lady who's from the community who's the supervisor for the farm workers. So she's really engaged. Beyond that, when our guests come, as much as possible, we engage the community in entertaining them. One of the things that happens is our guests can be paired with a community member to be part and parcel of their everyday life so that they can experience what local farming is like.
You call it a farm stay.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is available on the farm and what comes to the plate of your guests?
We are still very much a work in progress, I dare say, in terms of the farm stay angle, but we do have ducks in the farm, we have rabbits now, we have chicken, we have cows, we have goats. In addition, we grow different trees. We have apples, which we've just started growing. We have blackberries. And then we grow the typical food stuff, vegetables that you'd imagine. So we are getting to a point where we serve mostly our farm produce, which is organic. And I think that's so important because we all know the harmful effects of using fertilizers. So we expect that when you come to this farm stay, you also just experience that wellness of eating produce that is natural. We, as much as possible, we source from very reputable sources. And then we also have guard dogs at night, so that they're part of our security. But we are also part of the community in terms of security. We have a community patrol system throughout Naromoru, and we're definitely part of that.
Sounds almost like you're curating an experience. Can you tell us, when your guests come here, what kind of experience do you want them to live with? This
mostly comes from our name, the name Bessotted, the idea of love and the idea of being besotted with a location, besotted with one another. We want to create this sense of love, whether it's family love, romantic love, that when you come here, we nurture that and we bring it out so that you live with an experience of feeling like, all your problems from Nairobi, I would say, or from wherever you're coming from, are not with you. We say in Bessotted, love flowers. And the whole idea is that we're giving you a love experience. Love with nature, with land, and with your loved ones.
I really like that word you used, Bessotted, because I am feeling it. So thank you. But just, just on that note, a lot of people are not doing what you're doing, which is an eco-friendly farm stay. As we're having this conversation, there's no KPLC bill that will come with Bessotted Farmstay on it. And there's a liberation to that. But I'm sure it was not an easy journey. But we want to tell the stories of how you can build green places and just to identify that you can actually build them. They're accessible, they're affordable, and they're impactful. What advice would you give people who are thinking about building eco-friendly, and what lessons have you learned?
I must admit, it has not been an easy journey. In Kenya, I don't think you do any business without some conmanship and some lies. You just have to sleep it off and wake up to a new day and start afresh. Because ultimately, what is to be gained is so much more. I would say just keep on the journey. The lessons I learned, and that nobody needs to repeat really, if you ask me, is get the right people. Expertise. I'm so glad that we live in Kenya because the expertise available is amazing, but you really have to go looking for it. There are professionals, there are experts who are willing to be reasonable. I found them along my journey of being eco-friendly. It wasn't the first, the second, or the third, but by the fourth person, I already had learned so much, and I knew what to ask or look for, that eventually, you get the right people. Bessotted would not be what it is today without the help I've had from amazing experts. Whether it's woodwork we're doing, whether it's the stonework, whether it's the solar, the electricity, the solar panels, and that whole electrical system. All that has totally benefited from amazing Kenyan workmanship. And it's not always the most expensive. In fact, the more expensive they are sometimes, the more shoddy job they do. It can even just be somebody who's locally available. So the issue is to know what to ask for and to identify the right talent.
I am at the Bessotted Farmstay in Naromoru with two wonderful ladies who keep this place running. I have Jane Njoroge, who's the duty manager, and Emily Ndongo, who's in charge of guest relations. I really want to know what brought you here. What brought you to Naromoru? What do you love about working in this really wonderful space?
I wanted to try out a new experience at Bessotted since it's a farm stay and I have only been in a hotel. So I found it a good opportunity to learn. I love this place because the nature is wonderful. It's peaceful around here. There's no noises. Maybe in hotels there are a lot of noises. So this place is a bit peaceful. Yeah, I'd say it's a good working condition.
I want to know what you feel brings guests here. What makes a guest say, I want to come and stay at Bessotted?
Well, I've interacted with most of our guests, and one thing that stands out is the serenity of this place and the peaceful environment, the quiet and the breeze. It's just beautiful. They just love nature because most of them come from Nairobi, which is noisy and has a lot of traffic. So coming to a place that is peaceful is something that they really appreciate.
So tell me more about what's available for the guests to see. I think one of the things that I really like is that you have a farm. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, our farm is, as we said, it's eco-friendly, and we try our best to be organic. So most of our vegetables we pick them from our farm, like say carrots, pumpkin, maize, all those things. We also have some fruits that we get from our shamba, which is blackberries. So we try as much as possible to get our things from our farm, and that's something that guests really appreciate.
Yes.
And we also have a plan where we take our guests to the forest to go and see the forest. So it just makes them so happy to even see the cool and the beautiful place. Yeah.
So I can tell you, I'm happy also because I've eaten the food here and it's really fantastic, and you can tell that it's organic. It's wonderful food. What other features are there in this farm stay that really make it eco-friendly, besides the ones that we can easily see in terms of how you run and operate the house? What other things make it eco-friendly?
Okay, one thing that is really helping us in this farm stay is that we get our water from the mountain, and now we just have to filter it, and then it's safe for use. Yeah.
So literally it's water from the mountain?
Yeah, it's water from the mountain.
Okay, so you're not buying plastic bottles of water or anything like that?
No,
okay, all right. Green buildings really boil down to a few things: water management, electrical and energy conservation, and really waste management. And of course, when you're talking about those elements, there are people who make that happen. Today we're sitting with Wangechi Chege, who's an electrical subcontractor, as well as Anthony Kingori, in charge of solar and planning. And both of these gentlemen will be talking to us about the technical elements that contributed to an eco-friendly farm stay.
Being around the equator, it was, let's say, it was the right place that you could have installed the solar power system, because you usually enjoy sufficient sunlight throughout the year. Yes. So we decided with the client that we should consider installing a solar power system, although most of the clients usually fear maybe it won't be able to catch up with the ones that are usually given by our, let's say, main supplier, maybe the Kenya Power. Being on the slopes of Mount Kenya also, because there's usually, let's say, high tides of weeds. Yes. So we decided that we should also harness the wind energy. That one we usually do by use of a wind turbine, whereby we usually have an inverter which harnesses the power and stores it to the battery. Okay. Yeah, which also the same with the solar panels. You harness the sunlight energy, then you store in the batteries by a controller, which is, you may use a MPPT charger controller. Okay. There's a PWM. Or maybe you might decide by, let's say, sun version, whereby you convert direct sunlight to energy. Yeah, when you are using maybe pumps.
Tell us about the storage capacity of this energy.
The storage capacity of, let's say, like this premises is about 4,500 watts.
Wow, okay. Yeah. And that's sufficient for running this home in full.
Yes. They have dishwashers, they have washing machines, they have television, they have refrigerators, we have freezers, we have pumps. And we have service. We have both submersible and service pumps.
Wow.
Yeah, and they run at the solar system combined with the wind turbine.
Anthony, everywhere that I go, I see the gutters harvesting rainwater, and then you also have solar water heating. Just tell us about that.
Hapa maji kuna shida sana. We got water on Monday and Wednesday.
2 days a week.
2 days a week.
Okay.
Na labda hiyo maji hata inaga pressure. Sasa hii gutters inatusaidia, tuna harvest, tunaweka tank. We have the other ground tank. Then tuna pump.
Okay.
Kwa the tank, which na supply the main house.
Okay. So tell us about the solar as well, the solar water heating. It is enough for the whole of the house?
Inasaidia kila mahali.
You've talked about all that you have achieved here, but this show we want people to know and to get advice from you as experts and tell people that it's possible to build a green building, what is called a green building. So maybe I'll start with you, Anthony. Ungeambia mtu mwingine aje ambaye anataka kujenga nyumba kama hii, advice?
Mimi venye naweza ambia mtu about solar, hii maneno ya solar heater ni mzuri kwa sababu hakuna stima unatumia, ni jua peke yake. So mimi ndio naweza ambia mtu kuliko maneno ya stima.
Githinji, I'll ask you the same question. Give advice to our audience. Will you tell them to build green?
After you have installed it and the calculations has been done right and orientation according to the gradient, I would encourage them to go green because it's very cost effective.
So there you have it. Upfront costs can be a little bit more, but you will save more in the long run. So build green. It is accessible, it is affordable, and it is impactful. Today, I'm here with Elizabeth Wangechi Chege, who's the Vice Chair of the World Green Building Council. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much.
Who is Elizabeth Chege?
Oh, fantastic question. So as you started, I'm the Vice Chair of the World Green Building Council. I was elected this year to that position. Thank you to Africa and the rest of the world that did that. I'm also the Chair of the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council because it's split up into various regions. I'm also, on top of that, a former past chairperson of Kenya Green Building Society. And I'm also the CEO of Web Limited. So Web Limited is my day job. The rest of the others are volunteer work.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So I feel like this conversation is really important for what Built for Good is trying to do, specifically because you sit as a Kenyan, as an African in this role at the World Green Building Council. And as a professional as well. Maybe what you have not said is you're an engineer.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about what you feel is the role of built environment professionals around climate action. Why is it important for us to be involved?
Well, I think one of the main things is that professionals haven't realized it's their responsibility, first of all, to design, build, construct, and educate users of the buildings around sustainability. Because if you're not doing that, you're part of the problem. And that problem is the 39% greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment. The last 2 years when studies are being done by the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, we've seen we actually are emitting more from the built environment. So it shows as much as we're doing a little bit, we have a lot more to do. And the built environment is the lowest hanging fruit. If you compare how long, if you plant a tree today, how long it'll take to grow. So the opportunity is that we start now with the professionals. But they have to go back to school. You have to study. You know, it's not a matter of saying you're green and that's it. You really have to apply yourself. Over and above that is the consideration that there's targets that are being set. You know, net zero carbon buildings by 2030 for the new ones, existing ones by 2050. But even as we speak, there's people sat in offices drawing, designing buildings, and they'll go to business as usual. And the number of times we look at buildings around Nairobi, the rest of the country, buildings collapsing, it's actually a shame for professionals to be in that environment at this point in time.
So really what you're saying is that as Kenyans, as Africans, we have a huge role to play. And obviously you as being an African, having a voice in the space of green buildings, how important do you think that Africa has to be represented and Africa has to speak? What do you think is the impact of African voices in this conversation?
Well, one of the things is that Africa itself by 2050 will have 800 million more people living in the continent. Over 70% of them are youth. We have the energy, we have the skills. Even if we don't have the skills, we can learn from developed worlds and actually improve on their mistakes. Don't make the same mistakes, don't copy paste. But we haven't built Africa yet. And that's one of the biggest worries that I have. Because buildings is not just one building at a time. We'll never get anywhere with that. It's the built environment, so including infrastructure, including government buildings, our houses, our homes, our cities. So the knowledge around it is out there, the technology is already here, and there's buildings and people doing it already, so we have no excuse, especially from Africa. And if we start now at net zero carbon, then we won't lock in carbon like the developed world, where they're spending millions and trillions of dollars to go back and sort it out. We have a fresh plate to start from, so let's take advantage of it.
Oh, I love that we have a fresh plate to start off. That's the advantage of being African in this conversation. Yes. So you talked a little bit about the role of government, what is happening the world over. You've come from COP26, so I really want to hear how that was for you, like the conversations that you had, what your experience was. Tell us about that conversation, and even start off from what is COP26 for whom I don't know. Yeah.
So COP26, the number itself indicates the year. So this is the 26th meeting of the Center of Parties. I think it's the Center of Parties. So these different countries come together. They have resolutions, especially around climate and climate action, because climate change doesn't know any boundaries. It doesn't know this is Kenya, this is Tanzania. When it comes, it hits everyone. And also there's the element of leaving no one behind. So the country is also trying to be fair. It affects trade, it affects how people relate with each other. So they've been writing a lot of articles. You'll hear the reference of Article 6, Article whichever, but they're documents that are set with text on how we relate with each other, how we trade, and how we set the targets and agree on the targets. Then the onus is on the specific government to deliver that within their own countries. Developed countries promised $100 billion a year. We haven't seen that. It's now at $500 billion a year. There's some money, but not all of it. So developing nations are asking for that $500 billion because they're being affected more by climate change than the developed world, and we know that they cause most of the climate emissions. I mean, in total Africa, you'd say our approximate emissions is around 4%. Wow. Not much.
African continent.
Yes, but we haven't built yet.
Yes.
So what happens when we build? The thing is not too much with emissions, but to actually do it right, as we said before.
What is the built environment doing in their space to address climate action?
Okay.
COP26.
Yes, COP26 was actually the second time we had a built environment day. You know, it took a lot of advocacy, a lot of partners to actually have a day for the built environment. And I think the penny is actually dropping. The built environment professionals, financial institutions, they're actually sitting at the table now. And they're not sitting at the table asking, they're sitting at the table showing how we can actually meet that net zero carbon 2050 goal. And when I reference net zero, one thing I always say around Africa as well, it's not net zero, just carbon. We have to consider water, we have to consider waste. Otherwise, we create another 2070 to sort out Africa issues around the built environment. So the other thing as well with the built environment is that there was a lot of offers from the private sector. They've been sitting back waiting for regulations and policies. The business beyond green building has been shown, it's been proven. So they want to do it, and they can teach the governments around that. Lastly, the people themselves are demanding green buildings. Yes. They're demanding healthy buildings. Yes. They're demanding that whatever they're spending their money on, whatever they're spending their time, it doesn't make them sick. So health and well-being in the buildings as well.
Absolutely. And I think I've spoken about this as well, that buildings have the capability to make you sick. Because we spend 85% of our time generally in a building, whether it's your home, whether it's your office, you are in a building most of the time of your day and your life.
Yes.
I know you're engaged, in fact, in a lot of research as well, whether it's what's happening at the Global Building Alliance or even the World Green Building Council doing their own research. So I'd love to hear about where are we right now?
We're at a very advantageous point. We have a lot of opportunities, and also there's the element that if we miss it, we've missed it. It'll cost a lot more to go back and make it right. So the first thing that we did, we have a roadmap for Africa with the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. World Green Building Council, IEA were partners in this, and they had the most stakeholders put around the table, including a lot of Kenyans who sat around the table towards the roadmap for Africa. And one of the things that we keep going back to is urban planning. We have a lot of unplanned cities, you know, we're in one of them, yes. But it doesn't mean we give up. There's a way we can actually stop that. Our spatial plans are not aligned to climate change. Yet you'll find these counties building, spending resources. And one of the things you'll probably see on TV very soon is that when we have floods, roads are being washed off. Then we build them in the same place, and we're wasting resources that we actually don't have. Right. What it takes is actually a macroeconomic look, link it to the science. Okay. We have science-based targets. We have the science to show where the climate effects will be. And we start building with resilience in mind. Okay. So that's the opportunity on that basis with urban spatial planning. Yes. Beyond that is finance. Right. We've come back to the people paying. And one of the things we're saying about financial institutions, they have to create products, they have to innovate. So on the financial side, the financial institutions themselves need to come to the table. And actually at this COP, this is where we saw a bit of muscle in the private sector. We saw these institutions that already have started putting packages together across Africa. Locally, I need to see more of it. We've had banks here for many years. They really need to be part of the sustainable solution and not just giving us those expensive mortgages that they give us. That's a totally different conversation. It's also putting packages for people to refurbish their houses. It doesn't take much to actually have a strategy, for example, rainwater harvesting at a cheaper rate and higher purchase so that more people can do it. Same with other strategies. I know solar panels, people talk about it, solar hot water, but it's very few people who actually install these very simple, sustainable strategies that we should see. The financial institutions themselves have waited until their source of money, their source of funds says it's sustainable development or responsible development. They shouldn't wait for that. And this is where I say Africa has an opportunity to innovate, because we don't want products and packages that they just copy-paste from other countries. Same with buildings, same with finance. So this is a playing field that we want to see leaders in the financial element. I know that IFC, the owners of EDGE, are in the country. They're also looking at solutions around sustainable development. We know that ABSA are releasing some products as well, and they're premier members of Kenya Green Building Society. So we want to see more of that, but quickly, not in 5 years. We need to see it now so that we can see those green buildings in the next 2-3 years. So about 2 years ago at Kenya Green Building Society, we did a study to see if developers would build green. And we had all the developers say they would build green if they had the money, incentivized money. And the developments they had were over $200 million worth. And that was a quick study using Google Analytics. You can imagine how many more would actually build green if finance was inherently sustainable and demanding for responsible development. So there's a lot that needs to come from the top as well as from the bottom up.
Right. So you've talked about finance, and I love some of the things you said, which are really sort of, I feel, low-hanging things, like offering incentives to put rainwater harvesting systems or solar energy. They're really low-hanging things. I'd like us to speak a little bit about, both you and I have worked in advocacy in the built environment. I'd like us to talk a bit about policy, because as much as we talk about finance being available, as much as we talk about sort of mainstreaming this idea of green buildings, if the policy is not in place to support what we're trying to do, where are we in terms of policy, and where do you see the gaps are? What do we need to change?
Well, policy-wise, it's been said before that we're very good in writing policy and then putting them on the shelves. That's the same in the built environment. Starting off, for example, from the enhanced NDC that was submitted in 2020. It was a big win for the first time to have reference to green buildings, but the reference is just one line to say green buildings. we'll have policies and codes for that. But it starts driving the conversation. Beyond that, what we don't realize is all the sectors operate in buildings. So it references housing, but for you to live anywhere, you know you need the roads, you need school, you need hospitals, all the infrastructure and neighborhood developments that come with it. So we really need to get back to looking at the whole built environment rather than just housing. Per se, we know that residential developments will be 65% of the developments coming up in the near future. But at the same time, there's supporting developments as well. All of them need to be net zero carbon, net zero waste, net zero water at least. On the other side, when we move from the NDC, that is largely sitting in the Ministry of Environment, coordinating the other ministries.
Do you mind just explaining what an NDC is for those who don't know the technical term?
Sure, sure. Nationally Determined Contribution is what it's abbreviated to, NDC. And this is a very simple document that takes a lot of time to put together, strategies and officers and technical officers, to look at where a country is and where it would go towards greenhouse gas emission mitigation and adaptation. And now you'll talk about low carbon resilience, that has language that has crept into the discussion around it. The first one that came out was the intended national determined contribution. So Kenya said we'll abate our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% of the business as usual baseline, and that's available online. So this is the enhanced one in 2020, and this is just when we've mentioned green buildings.
Right.
But what else is there?
Yes.
I know for sure, I've reviewed the building code in Kenya, I think 4 or 5 times, every 2 years. Okay, look at the stakeholder.
We're back on the drawing board.
Where is it now?
Yes.
I was hoping that with the pandemic and post-pandemic and what we're going through, we'd actually come out with a building code. The building code itself, even when it comes out, it's outdated. When did we write it? In 2020. It's now 2021, end of 2021. Whatever we wrote there, we really need to upscale it. So one of the references and recommendations was that, is there a way we can actually have the building code and review it every year? Because we're learning, we're innovating, and it's a great support document that gives confidence to developers, professionals, and we know we're all targeting the same thing.
We're both EDGE certified professionals, and I really want to hear from you as somebody who's an EDGE certified expert. Why is it important that we should be talking about certification of green buildings? Why is that an important discussion to have, and why should built environment professionals seek green building certification?
Back in 2017, we didn't even have one EDGE expert. I think now in the country we have over 40. And we have, I think, 4 or 5 EDGE auditors. So we've already started to create green jobs that we keep talking about. But people had to go and study and do that. Over and above that, the certification systems have technology, tools of how to incorporate the strategies in the design, in construction, in operation of the building. For a country where the building code, where we started this conversation, it helped with the gap by not having a current building code. So the rating systems are ratified to international benchmarking. If we're not doing that with our own policies and our own codes, developers and investors won't wait for the building code to come out. So they look at what's the next best thing. But internationally as well, that's used to benchmark and measure, because what you don't measure, you can't manage. And mine could be green, yours could be light green, but we're talking about green, yet we have these hard targets we have to hit. There's a science behind it. And the science around it is that we need to design for people. And we keep forgetting that. We're designing for materials and we're designing for profit. But now we need to go back to design for people. We have how people behave in buildings, what they need, what's available, the resources that need to be used and saved. So with all that, we need to have a way that's categorized and standard. Because in using similar rating systems or benchmarking standards, then we know where to improve. We know how our affordable housing is performing, how our offices are performing, our homes, and other built environment as well. There's certification for infrastructure. So that's, all this is available. We don't have to create anything new. We have climatic data, so we contextualize it as well. And I really advocate for it, but at the same time, it's not the answer for sustainable development. We've seen sustainable development across the world that is not certified. But for a region like Africa, so that we can just get that mindset, that paradigm shift on how to actually build green, the rating systems really help towards that.
The objective of Built for Good is really to tell African stories on green buildings towards demystifying that this thing of green buildings is expensive, it's inaccessible. What would your advice be?
I would say reach out to the World Green Building Council. There's a website there. Kenya Green Building Society here locally as well. AAK, you know, we signed the MOU earlier this year.
Yes, you did.
So there's partnerships.
Yes.
And talking about partnerships, and this is one of the key takeaways from COP26, is radical collaboration. You can't do it alone. So call in the right people to support so that you move faster forward. And don't be scared of green buildings. They're not something from somewhere else. They're actually what should be inherent. And we have a right, we have a human right towards green buildings. Right. The carbon friendly, right. Healthy for us, as well as the whole resource circularity is a totally different discussion, but it's a lot of human behavior. Yes. We don't always have to go for new. We can recycle, reuse, and regenerate.
And that has been Elizabeth Wangechi Chege, the Vice Chair of the World Green Building Council. A few takeaways from our conversation: a people-centered approach in green buildings, radical collaboration, we cannot do things alone, and really towards net carbon zero for all existing buildings and new buildings by 2050. For all new buildings by 2030, we must do it together. This has been Built for Good, telling African stories on green buildings. In the next episode of Built for Good Africa, we shall feature the JICAM Administration Center, a green building located in Kara, Nairobi, and have a conversation with Zambi Mate, the founder of Jenge Makers, a company that makes pavers from recycled plastic material.
Built for Good, we tell African stories on green buildings.